Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to My World. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer, greatest professional wrestler of all time, your friend and mine, Double J, Jeff Jarrett. Jeff, how are you, man?
Conrad Thompson, how we doing, pal? It is a brand new week. Got the skis in yesterday, Connie. You know, the lake life. No, I love it. I love this time of year. Boats are getting out. Get to have a little R&R just for a second. All those rains we've had, Conrad. I've had a lot of logs and sticks and debris in the lake. But anyway, had a good weekend. Watched a lot of basketball. Went to Time Warp Collectibles. A great appearance up there. Shoes Baseball is rocking and rolling. Legends Classic coming up. We've got a fantastic topic today. As we're talking about individual talents, you know as well as I do, it's one of my top three. The Macho Man Randy Savage. I will not be doing an impersonation. We may get Brother Silva to chime in here and give us a impersonation. You never know. Connie, how you doing, pal? Let's talk about you.
Man, I'm doing great. I'm better than I deserve, and I'm really excited about a big AEW Dynamite tomorrow night. It's going to be Bryan Danielson's birthday, and on his birthday, he wants to catch the biggest ass whooping he ever has against Satnam Singh. I can't believe this is a real thing. Satnam Singh versus Bryan Danielson. Been said in the UFC a lot. Styles make fights. What in the world do you expect with this spectacle tomorrow night? Besides Danielson counting the lights, I mean, that's a given.
Conrad, you know, me and Satnam have ventured down into Mexico with AAA. Your friend of mine, Dorian. I don't think Dorian and his organization quite knew what they signed up for. Went down to the first Triple Mania of 2024 in Monterrey. And I'll just say my man Satnam made a debut that I'm still super proud of the guy. Happy for him. And I just know the world is about to see a mega star come on the scene. Now, a lot of things got to line up, but the raw talent that is obviously there. He's truly a 1 in a billion guy. AAA saw the group and liked it so much. Satnam, Parker Boudreaux, Sam Adonis, QT Marshall. The last Outlaw group, we're headed into the main event in Tijuana in the middle of June. So Satnam's career feels like it's getting a lot of jet fuel in it. And what an opportunity he has. We've talked many times on this podcast. I think Bryan Danielson is currently the best storyteller there is in professional wrestling. So that story of him, as you just said, counting the lights and toting an ass whooping, it's going to be interesting. But Satnam, he's got to step up to the plate, man. This is an opportunity. So lots and lots of pressure on my man Satnam. But I'm damn sure going to be tuning in and exciting for that. You never know what happens on Wednesday nights, do you, Connie?
You don't. And that's why we tune in. We're going to be tuning in to see Takeshita wrestle his first match in AEW in 2 months when he takes on Matt Sydal. He's just days away from taking on John Moxley on pay-per-view. And a lot of people are going to be paying attention to what Takeshita's doing after that big interview. Orange Cassidy and Will Ospreay are going to team up to take on Trent Beretta and Roderick Strong. I don't think I had that on my bingo card this year. Orange Cassidy and Will Ospreay in a tag team. We're going to see Tony Storm and Mariah May team up against Saraya and Harley Cameron. That's going to be the best looking match on TV in more than one way this week. We've also got Swerve Strickland wrestling Nick Wayne, the hometown boy. That's going to be 1-on-1. Last year, Swerve left Nick Wayne laying bloody in a heap. Dad's old ring. We'll also see Mercedes Moné in the house along with John Moxley. And of course, this weekend, we've got Collision in Las Vegas and then a huge pay-per-view, Double or Nothing, the in-ring debut of Mercedes Moné. Darby Allin is back and he's going to be in the Anarchy in the Arena match. Man, there is a lot of moving parts here, including Christian Cage challenging Swerve Strickland. We've said it a lot here on the pay-per-view front for AEW. It feels like they always deliver. And this is back to where it all started 5 years ago. Man, it's hard to believe that AEW's first show was just 5 years ago. On the one hand, it feels like it's been here forever. On the other hand, it feels like it's about 2 years old. Are you pumped? Big pay-per-view weekend?
Conrad, you were at the OG, correct? You were at the first one.
Yes, I was.
And that was obviously 5 years, 2019. I felt like because I had just gone back and I was still finishing up some of my independent work, and we had me and you, as in we, pronouns pal. We'd obviously been working together in the prior one, so 2018, but this was what really cranked things up, I guess you could say, and got things um, really taken to another level. And the success they had right out of the gate, it's that just doesn't happen. And like you just said, and look, when I was reading the notes today and refreshing, and I took some time on this one episode because I wanted to kind of think of some different stories and uh, bring my A game, bring some good story behind the story. And it feels just like yesterday. This is kind of crazy though, but me and Randy, I just can remember him, me being a young talent, like watching him perform because he went from Memphis to the WWF in like a blink of an eye, and now here we are. It really seems like truly yesterday AEW started, and it's been 5 years. Man, a lot has happened, but yeah, MGM, been a few Halloween Havocs there. There's been quite a few events. Tyson Holyfield. um, yeah, Tyson's fighting again. Tyson Fury. Man, I'm all over the place today. But yeah, 5 years. And here we are rolling in the triple main event as they are promoting. Pretty cool.
Speaking of all over the place, a lot of chatter about Shoes baseball. The Legends games here before we know it. What else is on deck for Shoes baseball?
Conrad, we're about to crank up, and I am so proud is the right word of the organization from top to bottom. Um, Golden Rule Entertainment is something that's who I'm a part of, and the Springfield Lucky Horseshoes is the team in Springfield, Illinois. And when we rolled in there 3 years ago, none of us really knew what to expect. But Jamie, my partner, has consistently talked about baseball's our platform, but not our purpose. And our purpose is to bring the community together. And he had the idea and in the deck, and if you will, the presentation that he made years ago to the entire Chamber of Commerce and the city and the open press conference. But the Legends game was one of the ones that he wanted to do. Springfield, right in the middle of Chicago and St. Louis, and so there's fans from both markets and all over Illinois. And year one, I think we had 6 Legends, 3 Cubs, 3 Cards. This year we have 14. It is going to be a packed house at Robin Roberts Stadium this Saturday. 14 major leaguers, lots of fun, local politicians and celebrities and media folks, and just all kind of. It's a great night, but the community does does get the opportunity to come together. So we're excited, and then the season kicks off the following week. I think our opening night is Tuesday, but we'll get into all that, Conrad, in the weeks to come. But super excited for my fellas up in Springfield, Illinois, the Legends Classic this Saturday.
Well, Shoes baseball is where you can find everything you need to know. Throw it in your Google machine, and you won't miss a thing. Also, while you're in your Google machine, is there anything else we need to touch on? I mean, as I understand it, I know there was a bit of a cliffhanger before awards day last week. I sort of guessed and suggested last week that Cody was going to go home with the award for the biggest draw. And I guess I was kind of right. It's a different phrase in high school nomenclature. It was just most popular, but most popular and biggest draw. That's kind of the same in business, right?
Well, I tell you what, and I don't know, Conrad, I hope Silva's got some pictures, but Karen's father passed away earlier this year. So, and Cody and him had a really good relationship. His name Jack Smedley, but he was affectionately known to the grandkids as Pa Jack. And so, last week on awards day, Karen got up and nice khaki pants, nice blue button down shirt, dark blue blazer, and the blazer happened to be one of Pa Jack's blazers that Cody now fits in. She had him some nice loafers. And so Cody got dressed to get his award. And all we knew was Cody was getting an award. It just got, actually got a letter in the mail and then got a note sent home. Awards day, dress accordingly, and hope family and friends can show up. So, Connie, you kind of hit the nail on the head, but we got there. And let's just say my man was styling and profiling. He had no part of wearing what Miss Mama Karen had laid out. He went straight up black jeans, black t-shirt, black shoes, and he wore his jacket. It's no longer my jacket. He went with the blue and black sequin jacket, and he picked up the award of crowd favorite. What a pop it was. There's a little video out there. I don't know if you guys are going to share that on social media, but my man, so proud of Codes. So proud of Codes. He got crowd favorite. And Conrad, I'm never going to live it down because I did this bad mistake that I told him. Well, Conrad, he goes, Conrad going to talk about me in the podcast? I said, every week, Codes. He said, and what did he say? I said, well, he thinks you're going to be the top draw. Just grinned and strutted into the game room.
Well, because I nailed it. I mean, take a look at that photo from the Strawberry Festival. I mean, it was a who's who at these collectible shows and everywhere else. I mean, he's out here signing walls. There's autographed walls now because of Cody.
Look at my man.
What a lineup that is.
He's Conrad, you would love Earl. He is a entrepreneur. He's cut from the same mold. Great dude. He owns Time Warp Collectibles, not one, but 2 brick and mortars, Chris Hughes. And the crew there, we had a great time up in Ashland, Kentucky this past Saturday appearance. And man, mail orders. It's kind of amazing now when you go to autograph appearances like that. People send stuff in, and what a great business we live in, Cody. Connie, it's no different, but Cody was the 3-hour entertainment.
So we'll throw that photo back up there. I don't know if Zoom is an option, but look at what's on Jeff's right wrist. You can't see his left wrist. He's got his hand around his bride, but on that right wrist right there, it's a black band with a big old Q. You know what that is? It's the Q3 brand. We've been talking a little bit about the Q3 band, but that's that insignia you need to look for. Whenever you see that on somebody's wrist, hey man, that guy is trying to get his life together. That's what Q3 band is all about. It's the easiest, most cost-effective way to stay grounded and to get healthy energy cells that must stay protected, strong, and youthful. The Q3 band will open, strengthen, and revive and then de-age cells by canceling internal stress and replacing unhealthy energy with healthy energy. This is an awesome way if you're trying to get more oxygen. That's what it's all about. The lifeblood of humans, as we know, is oxygen. And that's what the Q3 band does more than anything else. It gives you the ability to improve every facet of your health. We're talking your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health. And a lot of people have heard the term grounding or earthing. And experts say that may be the most healing and healthy way that you could ever try to take care of yourself. Studies show that if you were grounded every day, you'd most likely not get stressed, not be negatively affected by a great majority of the environmental toxins, which means you're not going to get sick as often. You're just going to feel better. You're also going to feel like you have significantly more energy all the time. You're going to feel like you have significantly better sleep. You're going to feel like you have a higher functioning immune system, so there's less sickness and disease. But more importantly, you're going to have a greater emotional well-being. But the reason Jeff wears it, as if that wasn't enough, is peak performance. Jeff is a big time believer in this. And so is the owner of the technology, Mike Flint. He's the oldest college football player in history. I'm not talking about kickers. My man played linebacker at age 59 years old, and he credited the Q3 with helping make it happen. I want you to try it out, and I want you to use this friends and family special that Double J's worked out. As JR would say, it costs nothing to look. Go right now to q3health.com and get your wearable stress cancellation band at a very special friend of Double J price. It's only $65. Now, this is a limited time offer because normally they sell this for $200. We're trying to show these guys what we can do. And boy, did they respond in kind. This is a price you won't beat. It's just $65 when it's normally $200. Jeff has worked them down to it's just $65, but you better hurry to q3health.com. Now there is a 30-day money back guarantee, so there's absolutely no risk for you. How do you beat that? That's when you know it's a great product, when they put their money where their mouth is. It's time for you to take control of your physical and mental stress today. So go get your wearable stress cancellation band at q3health.com. That's the letter Q, the number 3, health, HEALTH.com, q3health.com. I just thought it was interesting, Jeff, that this is not just a commercial. This really is a part of your everyday life. And that photo from you this past Saturday in Kentucky, that proves it, man. This is the real deal. Jeff, you got to unmute yourself, and then that Q3 band will work a lot better.
Yeah, I had me some iced tea, and I was sipping on iced tea. I apologize, but no. Yes, it is absolutely a part of my life. I wear it 24/7, except in the shower. But a little tidbit there, and look, I could really go down multiple rabbit holes. But you said so many things there. But one thing that fascinated me from the very beginning is that, look, the band is, it's rubber and all that. But when you open it up, there's a set of batteries, magnets. I call them magnets, but it takes 8. There's a process that takes 8 days to put these together. That's where the cost came in. And look, pre-COVID, they were, when these first came on the market, they were $199, and they were selling them like crazy and all that. And then just as the factory went and COVID, and so they had a little bit, from a business perspective, a little stutter start. When they came back, I'd been wearing mine for a long time, and I said, "Hey, man, I'd love to find out if there's an opportunity for my world listeners, if they can get that." And so I'm just telling you, the 3 pillars of health. I've talked about it. The bar stool. You can't have a stool, 3-legged stool, stand on its own. Emotional, physical, and emotional, and mental, physical, and emotional. I'm just telling you, this works, but don't take my word for it. That's what I want to end. Go to the website, and if you are a reader, research it and just kind of look through the study, and study after study and study after study, and you can really go in several different rabbit holes and find about the technology. Guys, it works. It is a part of my everyday living, and I hope everyone gets one of these because it is going to make your life
q3health.com. That's the letter Q, the number 3, health.com. Get that special price before it's too late. Let's talk about the man, the myth, the legend, the Macho Man Randy Savage. A few weeks ago, we tried to do our best homage to Jerry Lawler. He was one of the most important people in your growth as a professional wrestler, and you were certainly a huge fan of his and massive respect for him. And another guy in that same vein is the Macho Man Randy Savage. When I say Macho Man to you, Jeff, what's the first thing you think of? Like when you imagine Randy Savage in your mind, what are you coming up with?
If we're just playing simple word association, I'd say competitor, like intense competitor. It's hard to put it into words. And, there's many people that have met Randy for the first time, and especially this happened, later. They're like, "Hey man, he really talks that way. He's really that intense." But Randy, I can't come up with enough adjectives. And like I said earlier, as I was reading the research on this last night, and then this morning when I was doing cardio, and just thinking about different things and how much my father respected Randy, and then I started thinking about Eddie Marlin, my grandfather, on the other side of my family, how much Eddie respected him, and then my grandmother Christine. And it's hard to kind of go back into this era, and people that are listening to this that are new fans and even old fans. I mean, Conrad, you're a historian, and I know with JR and Bruce and Tony and others that go back to prior, the I'll say early 80s, and certainly into the 70s. It's almost like it's a completely different world as it relates to professional wrestling, because before cable TV and just how the business was run and a handshake deal and the touring champions and all that. But Randy, they just broke the mold, and he was such a unique human being, which obviously made him an incredibly unique professional wrestler. And at his very, very core, that's what I think about. Randy would compete playing cards, having the best match, running a business, try to beat you to the town. He wanted to get his bag first. I mean, he competed at everything. You hear legendary stories about Michael Jordan uh, wanting to compete on everything and hated to lose. Randy, um, super intense, just an incredible, incredible competitor. And I think at the very top of the list, that's one of the things, if not the biggest thing, that I respect out of Randy and learned from that.
As far as imagery goes, you saw him when he was in Memphis. You saw him when he was breaking in the WWF. You saw him at the height of the Mega Powers, and then Macho King, and then the long pants Savage in the WWF as a commentator, and everything he did in WCW, and even that cup of coffee in TNA. And we're going to talk about all that today. But when I say Randy Savage to you, or the Macho Man, which one of those visually do you think about in your mind's eye?
Oh boy, Conrad. I think context is king, because when I think about, let's call him Memphis Randy,
Okay.
when he wrestled uh, Ricky Morton or Lawler. I mean, when he was in Memphis and he was, look, you can still call him the Macho Man, but man, he God, he was so reckless, and the short tights and just kind of uh he, you felt when he walked to the ring. And man, this gets me back to my fandom, Conrad. That, and I don't know what year was your did you see your first wrestling match live?
Probably 1989.
Okay, so we're into sports entertainment for sure,
Yes.
without question. So my earliest memories were, my first memory, ironically, is in Birmingham. Boutwell, we got to the town early, and Crazy Luke Brown hauled it across the stage and scared the living shit out of me as a little boy. I couldn't have been 10 years old. But going to the matches way back when, it was just a different aura. It was kayfabe, but it was just perceived different. Randy in the fairgrounds in Nashville, when I would go out there, look, I'm in the dressing room or half smart or not even smart at all to the business. But when Randy went to the ring, people, he just had that sense of recklessness. Like, this guy's going to go off at the drop of there. Thank you, Dave Silva. That picture says it all, folks. If you're listening to this, go to our YouTube feed. I'm telling you, this photo right here is an early Randy. But man, you just think this guy is going to come unhinged at the drop of a hat. So when I think of different images, that's one. And then you can, what you said, the superpowers, that was unbelievable. And then when the era of Hulkamania, when big guys and big, demolition, and I mean, they're just big guy after big guy after big guy. And when you watch Savage Steamboat, you go, wait, this felt like completely different. And it's on the same card. Man, Conrad, that's what I'm saying. We may talk hours upon hours on this, because by the time he got to WCW, Randy's obviously the main events of Mania under his belt and all this. But Randy walking to the ring, go back and look at different photos. There were the guys that were in the NWO, if you will, kind of wore the same thing. T-shirt, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Hogan, Hall, and Nash, that they should have, but Randy never got out of gimmick. He always looked legitimately, and I'm not saying superstars in WWF, WWE superstar, but he always looked like a superstar. That was one of the things that, man, one of the first real, I don't say lessons, but man, he was a stickler about that and had no problem sharing that knowledge with me. Like, you need to always look the part. My grandmother would say, Randy, tell Jeff this or this and this. And, I get it that I'm supposed to get a lesson over here, but man, Randy always had unique looks, but it always dialed back to the Macho Man.
Randy's family has quite a long legacy in the wrestling business between his father Angelo and his brother Lanny. When do you first hear about the Poffos? Is it when they start running ICW, or did you know about them before?
No, it was the first. Yeah, I mean, the first time I ever heard of the name of the Poffos, it was kind of essentially a four-letter word. Like, okay, and there was no such thing in these days as independent wrestling. There was, the territories and the business, and the Tennessee territory, and Atlanta territory, and Crockett in the Carolinas, and Fritz in Texas, and Blanchard in San Antonio. You kind of always heard him referred to as really the name of the promoter. Well, Crockett's doing this, or Crockett's doing that, or Geigel's doing this, or Geigel's doing that. But the Poffos were referred to as they're running their outlaw organization. And it was, yeah, it was a four-letter word that you could tell that forward facing, my dad put on the front, man, what a pain in the ass, what a nuisance they are. Behind closed doors is that they were disruptors and not good for business and causing trouble. And it's kind of the price, but it was a threat. I know, man. I'm kind of you're going to have to help navigate me because people think we're crazy. But I mean, it was. I can't say it's a life or death, but there was physical violence threatened. And there's Dundee stories. There's Dutch Mantell stories. Obviously, my dad, Lawler, Eddie Marlin, the people that were there. It was no joke during this time. Like, no joke at all.
When the Poffos started running ICW in Kentucky, it's Randy and Leaping Lanny as the top stars. And they're going to go on TV and start calling out and challenging Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. They're, of course, top draws for your father's promotion. And they take this whole outlaw thing a little far. They even take out ads in the newspaper where they put $100,000 on the line if Dundee, Tojo, and your father, Jerry Jarrett, would appear. I mean, this is one of the last old school. I almost want to call it a territory battle, but I don't know that it necessarily is, but an outlaw versus a territory promotion. This has to be one of the greatest examples of that anywhere in the country, right?
Yeah, and then that's what it was. I mean, and look, it didn't just happen in Tennessee. I mean, there were territory battles, and most of the time they were over specific towns. And when my father and Nick split, he took the South End, as in Nick, and that was Chattanooga, Birmingham, and Nashville. My dad took, I know this doesn't sound geographically right, but Memphis, Louisville, Evansville, and Lexington. And so the Poffos, they were really Southern Illinois, Kentucky. They had an area, Bob Roop. They had some areas where they were running successfully, but they knew if they could kind of get into Louisville, Lexington, and Evansville, their circuit, their territory could become much more profitable. And you put it into context today, Conrad, it it's almost impossible to do. But when you think about another promotion running ads in the same in a local newspaper, but you're challenging other talent. Think about, hypothetically speaking, plug in any promotion you want: WWE, AEW, TNA, NWA, AAA, CML, whatever. But the promotional warfare, if you will, in the days of kayfabe, however, the business was not near as exposed. So the fan at home was like, what the hell is going on here? Because the people, the lines were so much more blurred. I'm not going to say they were completely blur, but there were no internet. There were no mainstream, certainly wasn't X and Instagram, and the business wasn't exposed like it is today. So in those days, and you have this Outlaw or another promotion challenging, the people believed. And the ones that were inside the business, they were like, hey man, this ain't a storyline. This is legit. And then throw in the dose of a family fighting for their lives. And that's what Angelo and Lanny and Randy were. Their livelihood as far as making money. It was intense.
Meltzer's gone on record as saying a lot of the talent in Memphis wanted to respond on TV to these PAFO challenges, but I guess your dad, Jerry, totally forbid it. Meltzer would say he constantly told them, ignore them because eventually they're all just going to go away. And he said spending any time talking about them would take away from the angles they're doing and trying to draw money with. And Jarrett impressed upon Jimmy Hart this advice, and Jimmy still tells that story to these days. And I think that's an important lesson. Like when he's being called out in a major way, your dad said, just ignore it. And we've seen some different promoters respond to that differently. What'd you think of that advice back then? And would you have handled it differently, do you think?
Well, you have to, I've never had the blessing or the curse to, I didn't live in this area. Me and you didn't live in it. All we can know about what would you do in these kind of situations. But the lesson that I was hammered in my head, and look, this is, Conrad, we could talk about this one piece of the podcast or one piece of the topic. We could go down so many different roads because it is subjective. And my dad never lost sight. He didn't put it in those words. It's situational. But he always said, son, he wouldn't say for the most part, but I'm going to put those, I'm going to paraphrase that in there. But that's what he believed. My grandmother believed. Never, ever, ever punch down publicly. There's no upside. There's no upside. And that was his mentality. Don't give Randy and his promotion, ICW, any of our TV time, because at the end of the day, that's really what they were fighting for. They were trying to come in, make enough noise. If they could have afforded to get on TV in Lexington or Louisville or wherever in the promotion, they would have. They would have gone and got on an opposing TV, but they didn't have the money or it didn't fit in their business model. And they might not have got the clearance. Or they didn't have the infrastructure because I've always, as time's gone on, what were they really fighting for? Yes, they were trying to draw a house, but what was their end game? And I don't think they really had a specific end game other than to create a lot of noise. And they did. So maybe they had achieved their end game, but they were fighting and clawing. But yeah, Conrad, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts from a business perspective about never punch down.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was friends with some talent a few years ago and they were sort of really struggling with that. And I gave the example, whenever there's a new car company coming out and trying to make a splash, it felt like for years they would always say, whatever the stat was, blah, 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 when compared to the new Toyota Camry. Like everybody compared themselves. So they did that same thing sort of with iPhones, like any smartphone competitor, blah, 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 when compared to the new iPhone, because those were the standards. Now you never saw iPhone doing promos about other phone companies, and you never saw Toyota Camry taking a dunk on Kia. Like that just didn't happen. And they even created a famous marketing bit back in the 80s called the Pepsi Challenge. They would sort of blind taste test people with Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Well, do you remember the Coca-Cola challenge? Probably not, because the shit didn't exist, because number one never talks about number two. So that's kind of always been my thought. I totally agree with your dad. And apparently the Poffos, though, they said, well, we got to punch up. Punching up is different than punching down.
There's a flip side, guys. Sorry to cut you off, but that's where we get interesting.
And it turns physical. Eventually, since they're not answering the responses on television, Randy Savage is waiting in Lexington for these guys to pull up from the Jarrett promotion in Memphis and do their show. He's already there by the time the talent make it. And Jimmy Hart, of course, is there first. And Randy Savage lets him know, I'm taking out Jerry Lawler tonight. And this is all happening in front of fans because fans are outside of the arena waiting to get inside and see these great wrestling matches they've been looking forward to. And
Arena.
They're ready to roll. And that's when Jimmy breaks the bad news. Hey, Lawler just broke his leg playing touch football. He's not going to be here tonight. Savage immediately says, okay, tonight I'm taking out Dundee. And he meant it. It wasn't just Randy Savage who was there. The entire ICW locker room bought tickets to this show in Lexington. And the idea is we're going to kick the shit out of Bill Dundee when he comes out for the main event. But right before that match happened, the match before, a fan started to attack Jimmy Hart. A riot starts, not involving the crew here. And the police have to get everybody involved. And they're settling the fans down. But now with all this strong police force, the main event goes off without any issues. But that's not the full story, because allegedly Randy Savage turned the volume all the way up in real life too, not just in front of wrestling fans, but there's a pretty famous Waffle House story. I can't believe this is real. Chat me up about the Waffle House story.
Well, so and look, there is, the legend and the story grows, but when you really drill this down to this set of circumstances, no coincidences, only convergences. Savage and his crew had kind of look, and I know Randy, I mean, that there was multiple, and I think different people have told different versions, but the ICW crew had enough. They were going to, because spending money when you run ads in a newspaper, that ain't free. Getting in your car and driving 150 miles or 200 miles, or, there were some things, and that's what Eddie Marley used to say. Those knuckleheads are spending gas money to come harass us going in and out of the buildings. What the hell? I mean, they were really trying to make noise. Well, they had finally had enough, and they had planned to, okay, we're going to kick Lawler's ass, and that will get a response, and that'll get notoriety, and that'll help our promotion. Lawler playing touch football in Memphis. This when we pick up on the Lawler episode, this is kind of where we'll dive in, because that's when on TV, Jimmy Hart went out at my dad's direction and says, what do you do to a horse that breaks his leg? Well, you shoot him and kill him. And Paul Ellering came out, was the new king of Memphis, and Lawler healed up on the leg and came back as a babyface. And we'll get into that story. But so Lawler not there, Dundee there. Dundee, is the number 2 babyface who was thrust into the number 1 slot. And then here are these guys. Okay, Lawler we're going to kick your ass, Bill. And for there to be a riot and Jimmy Hart doing his antics as a heel, and the police have to come down to ringside, and they were already on notice. And so there weren't any opportunities, and however you want to say it, cooler heads provide at this building. And I just want a little footnote here. And this is something that, we're talking early 80s. But for those that don't know, the state of Alabama, the last 20 years, Roll Tide, Crimson Tide football is, and it's always been, but, Bear Bryant back in those days. But in the state of Kentucky, basketball, legit. It is the absolute number one. It is the number one sport in so many ways. But Rupp Arena is where the University of Kentucky plays their basketball, and they fill it up. And so we ran there monthly. Now, we didn't have 18,000, but the way you could petition the building off and curtain it off, 10,000. So, but the way it was cut in half, it was a loud, rowdy, but great parking. But Rupp Arena in Lexington is the Mecca. Everybody came there. So for Randy and those guys to make a point that we're going to jump in the ring in the main event of this show, it was a big strategic hit. And when it didn't happen, they pivoted and as talent does, as we are creatures of habit, they line up. And I don't know, Conrad, because I think there's 2 Waffle House incidences actually where the Dutch refers to, and you're not talking about the Dutch, but you're talking about when Randy jumped Bill, correct?
Whatever you'd like to share about the Macho Man Randy Savage and a Waffle House in Tennessee.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it ended up being back in Tennessee. It's not in Lexington. They had a scuffle that went nowhere. But yeah, and Dutch tells this story better. We need to get him his version. But they jumped Bill, and there was I don't know all the details of it, Conrad. It got ugly, but it was kind of the end of the. I remember. Yeah, this was the end of it because I mean there were guns every night that were not drawn, but it could have or it did get out of hand. But at the Waffle House, Bill Eaton or Randy goes in loose cannon, and they fight. Police come, and it was a mess.
Allegedly, there was a police dog. I mean, the story just gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah, that's where Randy punched the dog, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's amazing when we say which Waffle House story are we talking about with Randy Savage? Like that's the level of crazy we are. Where there are, if someone says, "Tell the so and so Waffle House story," and the response is, "Which one?" The one where there was a gang fight or where he beat a police dog? Like which one? Like that's where we were. That's Randy Savage. He was an outlaw. And fast forward to 83, and he's actually going to write a letter to Jerry Lawler apologizing for everything he had said and saying, "Hey, I'm looking forward to working together to do some business." How about that? Now, of course, Jimmy Hart gets a call from Jerry Lawler, and Lawler tells him all about the letter and is asking Jimmy, "What do you think about this?" And Jimmy says, "Man, this will be great." And as Jimmy tells the story, Lawler said something like, "What if it turns into a real fight?" And the idea here is Jimmy saying, "Hey, I got your back." And they finally do business together. After years of this being a shoot, we agree, let's make some money. 8,000 fans are at the Rupp Arena. There had been no television. There was no angle, but if you knew, you knew. Boy, fans had to be excited to finally see this. What do you remember of this?
So I believe the story goes in this way, in that Randy and okay, because the night of the that they were going to jump Lawler, he wasn't there, and they went on the outskirts of town, and there was a big scene there. The Nashville Waffle House story, what with the police dog, and I think there was some illicit drugs and folks hiring the kite. Um, it was a real spectacle. That's the one that happened not far from my house. So those 2 different ones. But on this, when Randy had kind of thrown in the towel and they realized ICW is not going to make a go of it, Randy called my father and basically said, "Hey, um, you know what? It ain't going to work. And I want to apologize." And my dad's like, "You ain't got to apologize for nothing." And this is kind of the crux for me of the whole set point on a learning tree, a set of circumstances for how I watched my dad and heard the stories, and then heard my grandmother and heard Eddie Marlin. And then most importantly, heard Randy's version of it, is that Randy was basically calling to say, "Hey man, sorry, didn't, there's a lot of bad blood, but I want to move on past this." And my dad basically said is, "You don't have to apologize for nothing. You were trying to make a living and doing exactly what you thought was best." Because my dad, he in Memphis and on that Tales of the Territory story, Roy Welch, who was my dad's boss and partner, sent a guy in the ring after him. It's just kind of how they did business. It was a completely different set of circumstances. But my dad knew that, okay, me and Randy can do business, but most importantly, Randy, you're going to have to do business with Lawler because that's going to be your opponent. Why don't you kind of think through this and figure out how we're going to do that? And my understanding is Randy said, "All right, I'm going to send him a letter." And so the letter happened and the conversation, and then that's when I guess you could say the creative process was put, because again, Lawler's in storylines and this and that. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, they shoot a Randy Savage story, which was a shocker because for so long, I'd say so long, a couple of years, it was Outlaw Wrestling that was the undercurrent. But a lot of people didn't understand this, so they had to go back and retell all the story. And Lawler did that on his Saturday morning promos, which I wish we had clips of those because Randy and Jerry's promos during this time.
It's a great time in wrestling history, and it almost didn't happen. I think allegedly, once Randy is the top guy in the WWF, years later, he calls Bill Watts to thank him for the advice. So I guess somewhere along the way, Bill encouraged him, hey man, this outlaw stuff has a shelf life. And basically the gist of the message that Randy went to Bill with was, hey, if I wouldn't have went to Memphis, I wouldn't have got this big break. I wouldn't be where I am. It was great advice. And with trust, go ahead.
So on that was the life lesson that Randy would impart on me years later. But his whole mindset was, and whether it was Watts or partially Watts, and I know Randy, that's another thing. Randy, you have to understand, Lanny and Randy, obviously brothers, and Angelo, who was, I think they cachet him as a journeyman wrestler, but at one time he, or maybe he still does, held the world record for most consecutive sit-ups. But they're a very regimented, focused Chicago family. Randy played pro baseball, super athletic, and all that. But Randy had a real mindset, and he did think Watts, but others about stay in the game. Life lessons are don't take yourself out of the game, and we'll see an example of that here in a minute on his WWF to WCW days. But him thanking Watts years later because Watts gave him the advice, hey man, you're right there in Tennessee. Try to make something happen.
With the trust issue seemingly put to bed, this is all directly from the Observer. Savage and Angelo Poffo showed up on Memphis television, acting like they were barging in on a live television show, and Savage demanded Lawler. Eddie Marlin, who played the role of promoter, tried to reason with Savage, but leaving during the live show. Eventually, Lawler said he was tired with all the talk for all those years and wanted the match. And the match took place on December 5th, 1983 at the Mid-South Coliseum. Lawler would retain the Southern title and win by DQ. There's 8,000 fans in the building. It's not a sellout, but it's the fourth largest crowd of the year. And, listen, Andy Kaufman beat it, but goodness gracious, this is big business. Normally they were doing like half of that. Week 2, it was a cage match with Randy Savage and Jerry Lawler. Maybe some of the shine was off. Some of the newness was off because instead of it being 8,000, we were just over 4,500, but still they finally got together. People decided to make money, and it feels like more often than not, that's the way it's supposed to be in wrestling, right, Jeff?
Yeah. And look at that cage. Those bring back fond memories. That was the, what do we call that was the wooden cage because the posts were made out of 2x4s nailed together. And he was, anyway, I remember seeing Eddie transport that thing up and down the road. But anyhow, Randy and Lawler and others will tell the story that, they were popping along doing 4,000 or 5,000, people a night on a Monday, which you could make plenty of money at, but they basically doubled it and almost a sellout. I think 9 would be considered a sellout, 10-8 really crammed in there. But anyway, almost doubled and then almost dropped in half, which they were disappointed at the time. And this goes what they would always say. Look, I wasn't, in the business part of this, but Conrad, they basically said they figured out, oh, wait a minute. They're actually working. People didn't say that, but they thought they were coming to see a shoot week 1, which I chuckle at, this one's real. Oh no, we're going back to our wrestling crowd.
Well, in 1985, they drum it up again. big business is happening. They got nearly 9,000 fans there at the Mid-South Coliseum. And it's going to be time for Randy Savage to head to greener pastures. So, of course, he has a loser leaves town match with Jerry Lawler. And before you know it, Randy's on his way to New York. And we know that he's going to become a megastar there. It's a different time. It's a different era. And there's pretty famous stories, even when Jimmy Hart gets the call that New York is interested. Allegedly, as I've heard the story, Jeff, when Jimmy is conveying that to Randy Savage, Randy's wondering, is Jimmy wearing a wire so he can record my response to being excited or not excited about New York? It's crazy paranoia. What do you remember about hearing that Randy Savage was going to New York?
Well, and so that's what I was, if you line up the timeline, WrestleMania 1 was 83. And
that's 85.
My bad. Good gosh. 85. Yes. 85 is 1, correct?
80 March of 85 is the very first WrestleMania.
And this is not long after that, if I remember correctly. But anyway, the statement that was made in so many ways in WrestleMania, I mean, Vince made no bones about it. We're going national. And so that's when I guess you could say the red alert was on with all territory promoters. And you just didn't really know. And Randy has said, I believe in multiple interviews, he felt such a loyalty to my father and lawyer for giving him that chance. Like, how's he going to deal with this? And like, he didn't trust nobody. Later in life, it went to a bizarre level, but he just wasn't sure. But as the story goes and time went on, he kind of understood, okay, here's an opportunity, and the money that was talked about and everything. And look, that was something that, my dad, sure, he hated it. Well, yeah, he hated it. But at the end of the day, Randy was insistent upon, you want a 30-day notice, you want a 6-week notice, what do you want? And I think they did it in under a month. They did the loser leave town, and he put Lawler over around the horn, and it was off to New York. And they had such a mutual respect on all of that, because at the end of the day, they were both really at their core entrepreneurs, and that it's just that simple.
Well, maybe you'd like to be the big boss and be a little entrepreneur of your own. Have you heard about this new mobile game called Modern Mania Wrestling GM? It's a pro wrestling general manager game that you can play on your phone or tablet. I think this game is really a hidden gem. They've got great looking characters, a slick interface. It's easy to play in short bursts or even long sessions. And it's a pretty simple premise. You collect cards for wrestlers, match types, venues, and skits. You use these cards to then book wrestling shows. The better shows you book, the more in-game cash you'll earn to collect more cards. Team up the right wrestlers and you'll unlock their tag team card. Match certain wrestlers against each other and you'll unlock their feud card. Manage your roster, create factions, compete with, or even control other promotions inside the game universe. It's honestly a lot of fun. It's also free to play, and the developers are constantly updating the game with new characters and features. To get the game, just search for Modern Mania Wrestling GM in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. Once you've played through the tutorial, head to the settings screen, and on the bottom right, you'll see a code button. That's where you can enter the promo code HEAT, HEAT. You'll get a bunch of free wrestlers and game cash. Wrestling fans, do yourself a favor. Check this game out. Modern Mania Wrestling GM in the App Store or Google Play Store. And be sure to go to the settings screen. The bottom right hand corner, you'll see code. Press that button and type in HEAT, HEAT. Get a bunch of free wrestlers and game cash on Modern Mania Wrestling GM. So listen, man, we see Randy Savage debut for Vince McMahon's World Wrestling Federation. And we also meet very quickly into his run here, his new manager. It's not going to be Bobby the Brain Heenan. It's not going to be Slick. It's not going to be Captain Lou or the Grand Wizard or any of the other crazy heel characters that we've got running around. It's Miss Elizabeth. And my understanding is he met her down in that Kentucky area. Did you get to meet Elizabeth at all in Memphis or see her at any time during the Memphis piece of his career? Or do you see her for the first time like we all do on WWF programming?
A few spot shows and like a hello, but I can tell a story about Eddie Marlin because Randy, I mean, when he worked, well, he did it his whole career. He would always get to the building early, and he's a business guy. And Eddie was very accommodating, and Randy'd get to the town early or whatever it may be, but he made sure that Liz had somewhere to sit away from the fans, whether it's up in the back or whatever. So he got to know Liz as Randy's girlfriend, and that was it. And then fast forward, whatever year, 2 years later, and specifically when they really got into the storyline, Eddie was, I guess you could say, kind of amazed at not a yeah, amazed, a fan. We're all got a mark in us or a fandom in us, but how Liz was portrayed because she was the anti-manager. She hardly ever spoke and never did anything heelish, but a huge part of Randy's presentation. And so, here in Tennessee, it was Randy's girl. Next thing you know, she is same billing as Hulk Hogan. It was a fascinating uh, transformation, if you will, for us that knew Randy when he was here.
It really is something else to see how quickly he has so much success. I mean, the Intercontinental title run. I mean, I guess we should mention, I mean, he has that George Steele feud that really puts him on the map, especially with Miss Elizabeth. But then this Intercontinental title run, and he becomes synonymous with that new Reggie Parks title, that new design, puts on an absolute classic with Ricky Steamboat at WrestleMania 3. And he just has so many major moments. It feels like, hey, he's just at WrestleMania with George the Animal Steel. That's a big deal. He beats it in 3. And then in 4, he wins the world title. He becomes the tournament winner to crown the new world champion. And then a year later, the mega powers explode. And that's the angle. That's the story that really hooked me as a young wrestling fan. It was such a big part of my fandom. These two guys together, everyone my age had their action figures. I mean, they were even posed like that, but these were just the iconic characters of the World Wrestling Federation. But that success at WrestleMania continues because WrestleMania 6, he's working with Dusty Rhodes. And in WrestleMania 7, he's going to be in another big match. This time it's the retirement match for the Ultimate Warrior. WrestleMania 8, he's working with Flair. I mean, you're seeing all of this progress as you're, being a young fan to cutting your teeth and getting in the business to now we're making towns and getting some success. And your man Randy is still blowing up. What'd you think seeing him take on Hulk Hogan and later Ric Flair for the world title at WrestleMania? I mean, that's as big as it gets, right?
Can we go back just real quick? You said, and I love it because Conrad, you always come up with kind of the belt footnote. Did he make this? Would you call it? Because it's over my, what is that?
Reggie Parks made the Intercontinental title that's over your belt and over your shoulder. And they had a different Intercontinental title design before.
Which one was that? Or
it was a trophy belt. It was just a 5-plater. It's in the same style as, like the ones that,
oh wait, did Pedro have it? Not Pedro.
Yeah. All those guys held it. But when Tito gets it, Tito's sort of the transitional champion for the new belt. And then of course we know he's going to drop it to Randy Savage, and that belt really rises to prominence around the same time that Vince is going national. So when people start to think about an Intercontinental champion, a lot of our listeners probably think of Randy Savage as being the first guy in their fandom they remember with that title.
And mine. That's kind of where I was going with it. Because look, not until I was a magazine guy, obviously just hanging around wrestling offices, but so Pat Patterson, Pedro, the other IC champs. So Randy really was the first one, but technically Tito, are you telling me, was the first one with the Reggie Parks?
Yes, but he dropped it to Randy, and Randy
technically
blew it up.
Yeah. For me, Conrad, yes, I was in the business, but if there's a talent that I born and raised around here with Lawler. But that's when, because I knew Randy, not great, but well enough, and knew that the ups and downs him and my father had. But to see him knowing that, okay, he's not much taller than me or my size, or we were close, and he was in Memphis, and uh, his rise to prominence, and like you said, he was always up there. I think in a lot of ways, Randy, I aspired that man, if he comes from this area and can get up there on top, I at least got a shot at it. You know, I've always thought Randy was, like I said, they broke the mold. He's such a unique talent. His in ring style is different. His promo style, he made everything his own. I mean, even his psychology was a little bit different. That, to me, masterpiece he put together with Ultimate Warrior. And look, everyone knew that Warrior uh, just was, you know, he was a gimmick wrestler and drew a boatload of money. But for Randy to have the kind of match he had with him, I respected Randy's ability to work with anybody, like I do Lawler. But their skill set is, in a lot of ways, just a license to print money because they can work with anybody and draw money. And I respected that so, I mean, so much. And seeing Randy on the stage of WrestleMania year after year after year after year, it just kind of, in my mind and in my fandom and in my business mind, it put Randy on a pedestal for me.
He becomes the man in February of 86. So just before WrestleMania 2, Randy wins the Intercontinental title and happens at Boston Gardens. It was a television match. It was a big moment, but he would have so many more big moments. Hogan, Flair, on and on. Even briefly returns to Memphis for the USWA in 1993. He's going to come in and defeat Jerry the King Lawler on October 11th, 1993 in Memphis to become the USWA World Champion. Of course, he vacates the title because this agreement between the USWA and WWE comes to an end in November of 93. But you had it back for a cup of coffee. How cool was that? Randy.
And this was, look, the talent exchange, if you will, you know, go back to Lawler, did some shots for them. There was Men on a Mission, Well Done. There was a talent exchange of folks, 92, 93. That's when Brett and Owen came down, and we were doing different, you know, the narcissist Lex Luger, different talent were being exchanged back and forth. And there was a run there where my dad Vince had a conversation, and it was essentially, hey, Vince, I want to give your guys all the work I possibly can. And I'm going to do what I can to be the best partner as far as the developmental. But candidly, the guys you're sending me, they ain't selling no tickets for me. I need somebody that will draw. And I don't need them often. But if you can give me just a little love every other month, if you will, something along those lines, it'll make the times when I'm having to take undeveloped talent and try to help them get ready much better. And that was kind of the conversation that I think goes back maybe a year before this, or 6-9 months. And finally they came to some type of agreement where, okay, we'll give you Savage. And they worked up some type of storyline. And I think there was situation we won't go into that happened. And then by 94, that's when my father had said, all right, I'm going to come. Vince said, hey, it ain't working out in Tennessee. Why don't you come to work for me? And I think that's that. So during this era, but yes. And there was a Tuesday show. I don't know if it's a single or a tag that I got to wrestle Savage. And I think an impromptu match that it was kind of either made the night of or something along those lines. But that was kind of a dream scenario for me.
You never got a singles match with Randy though, right?
I think in Louisville.
But you just said it was an impromptu tag.
Either a tag or a single. I did something in Louisville with Randy that was unexpected, but maybe not a single.
I do find it interesting. You were in 2 Royal Rumble matches,
Yep.
one in Madison Square Garden, not televised. Then the 94 Royal Rumble match, you guys were both in it. Uncensored 97, there's a Team NWO against Team Piper against Team WCW. Well, you're with Team Piper and Savage is with Team NWO. I don't know if we count that. There was a Thunder Battle Royal in 2000. And then, of course, the 6-man that we're going to talk about in TNA. But then maybe a tag. Well, maybe we'll find something in Louisville, see if we can find something. Because
92, it was during that era, because the thing I remember, the takeaway is the old man was like, "Hey man, I got to have a talent that can draw." And they talked to Randy, and you got to remember Randy's schedule in 92. I don't say it's the last thing he wanted to do, but it had to be up there at the top of the list. You mean on my off day, I'm going to go wrestle uh, in Memphis, Louisville, and Nashville and Evansville? But I know it was a challenge, and I think we got him for Mondays and Tuesdays for a short period.
we got to mention that 94 Royal Rumble. He actually eliminates you after just 90 seconds. But if you're going to go out quick, at least it was one of your favorites doing the honors for you, or the favor for you.
Yeah, and it was I think that entire kind of story, Providence, Rhode Island, was the Undertaker Yoko night. And who won this Rumble? So this was 94. But anyway, yes, I remember Pat Patterson in the ring. I'd been in the company.
That's the double finish, Jeff, with Lex and Brett.
Okay, I'd been in the company a month.
Yeah,
not long at all. And I just remember Savage coming to me and he said, "Be nice and easy. Don't you worry." I said, "Fling me right over." So yeah, all of 90 seconds. And Mike Rotundo, I think I had a conversation with him. He said, "Jeff, you're going to get paid exactly the same. Be happy." And I'm like, "You kidding me? I'm getting to work with Randy."
we got to mention one of his last moments in the company, or I guess one of his last angles in the company. March of 94, you had just beat Coco Beware on Monday Night Raw. Randy was at the commentary desk with Vince McMahon, and you go to that table and you're running your mouth at Randy, and you go back in the ring. You're challenging him to come in. He does. You guys brawl into a corner. He whips you across the ring. Coco hits you from the top rope. Randy throws you out of the ring. I mean, getting to do this for the number one show, or the number one company, their number one show, with one of your heroes of wrestling, this had to be something you were optimistic about. And we know ultimately it doesn't become a thing. He's going to wind up leaving the company. But did you think at that moment, I'm going to get to work with Randy here?
Yeah, okay. And this is where, God, I'd love to ask, we probably have, because it probably wouldn't be a topic. Bruce may have some insight on this. What do you, in all your podcasts, Conrad, didn't the Savage exit somewhat come out of the blue?
Yes.
Yeah. Because here's what I remember, that they wrote the TV open ended, and they obviously didn't tell me. I didn't know none of the ongoings, and my dad certainly didn't tell me. But I don't think they really knew where that whole contract situation was going on. But they did this as a teaser to leave it open ended. And Conrad, you kind of already said it. The thoughts that went through my mind: are you freaking kidding me? I'm going to get the opportunity to work with Randy. I mean, just the fact that Vince had enough confidence in me to kind of put me in this spot, to me was huge, absolutely huge. Because I hadn't been in the company a year.
He doesn't have his WrestleMania match cut. Maybe he should have. You had yours cut that year, but we know that 6 months later, come September, he's out of here. Yep. He's going to fairly abruptly leave the company. It's been said over the years that he really wanted to work with Shawn Michaels, who was coming into his own as a singles performer. And he really felt like they could have a series of matches. And I guess he even pitched or presented a plan allegedly to Vince in that regard. And Vince was pretty clear in saying, "Hey, we're going with a youth movement."
Big time.
The idea being Vince felt like Randy's days in the ring were behind him. He wanted to focus on younger guys. Had that similar speech with Ric Flair. Rick decided to go to WCW. And there's been lots of rumor and innuendo about what really happened. Was that it, or was there something else? And people want to be childish and come up with theories and speculation. And I know we've had former girlfriends come forward and say, "Oh, he told me." I don't know how much of any of that I believe, but when you hear that Randy was leaving the company, what was the chatter at the time?
I was shocked, but just because the perception, um, man, Connie, I love doing the podcast because it takes us back to that era when you, in we'll call it 92, 93. Is that the absolute lowest point of WCW?
I mean, I believe 94 and 95 were, I mean, maybe 95 is the absolute lowest. I forget
Okay.
how much money, but
Okay.
I think it's 6 million that Bruce has said that Vince announced to the office. He had to pull, quote unquote, out of my ass in order to keep the company going.
No, WCW. When was that the low part? When was WCW?
They lost money every year. I mean, the low point was 2000 when you were champ, but,
No.
no, I'm just busting balls, but they never turned a profit. 88, 89. They never made any money until 95.
Okay. So, but I just remember it's like whatever sports analogy you want to put in there, Randy being the bluest chipper of blue chippers, main event, main event, main event, IC legend, world champion, retirement match. I mean, he was just on such a pedestal. And I always scratch my head of, how's he announcing? But okay, this is TV. So Vince gets to have him on the TV product, six segments, 7 segments, as opposed to just one. He's his color commentator. Okay, it's a different mindset and all this. It wasn't even fathomable in my mind that Randy would leave under any circumstance. It did not make any logic because you're going to go from, however you want to say it, the number one franchise in the world to in WCW was, part of I still, in a way, it was all the territories combined. Vince won on his own, and, WCW was a combination of Crockett's, Watts, a little bit of Kansas City, a little bit of Florida. But for all intents and purposes, it was, the territories against Vince that were getting destroyed. Their ratings were that good. They were, quote unquote, still on their old weekend time slot. Or WWF was in prime time on Monday nights. I just like, what? And then I remember me and my father having a conversation that, and I don't do the good Jerry Jarrett impersonation, but son, this bodes well for you. But because I just asked Dad, like, why? And he goes, Vince has a vision and it is a youth movement. I'm like, Randy ain't that old. And wait a minute, Lawler's older than him, and Lawler, but Lawler was a color cap. But the vision that the company set forth, Randy didn't fit in it. And so you go, okay, he's going to go make a lot of money down there. And I think that gets hidden or forgot about in so many ways because the Nitro, Third Man, Hogan, Hall and Nash, the NWO, certainly in this universe here, Conrad. But I think the Savage jump is monumental. I mean, it's a big deal.
I don't think it gets talked about enough. I mean,
I agree, man. When you really put it in context, Hogan won, Savage 2. But who's the better in-ring performer?
well,
No doubt.
that's not even, I mean, to me, it's about what Savage coming did. Like, as a reminder, Hogan comes into WCW and they enjoy their greatest success ever. Bash at the Beach 94. They even have Ted Turner out there for the contract signing. It's finally going to happen. The WrestleMania match we never got, Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair. They break every record in July of 94. But boy, it goes to diminishing returns after that. Like, they try a return at Halloween Havoc. This time they put the career on the line for Ric Flair and he loses. and it's still there. There is no quick fix. Well, it just so happens the month before in September, that's when Randy was finishing up with Vince. Come January of 95, here comes the Macho Man Randy Savage. And that's after we just had a pretty abysmal Starcade with the Butcher versus Hulk Hogan. Things are not going well in WCW. We need another top star. Who better than Randy Savage? He debuts in January 95. Fast forward, we announced Nitro, of course. He's there at the Harley Davidson Cafe for the big rollout alongside Hulk Hogan and Sting, not Ric Flair or anybody else. They go with Randy Savage. And of course, Nitro is right around the corner. And so is the Slim Jim sponsorship. Like just having Slim Jim associate no longer with WCW or with WWE, but now with WCW, that's a big deal because you're always trying to get some of these major brands that you're pulling out your pitch book for to try wrestling. That's quote unquote, not WWE. So as if advertising in wrestling wasn't bad enough. Now it's the off brand wrestling. It's the not WWE wrestling. That's the way it was perceived back then. I mean, they were the Kleenex or the Coca-Cola. They were the brand. And I think Savage coming over not only gave more credibility and star power, but it also gave that Slim Jim sponsorship. And that was a vote of confidence in the advertising community as well, because the same agency, it's not like Slim Jim's just doing their own marketing. They're using agencies who are seeing what everybody else is doing. That was a big deal for WCW that doesn't get enough discussion.
Man. Connie, I love the history lesson because the whole timing of it. So Hogan signed what month of 93?
It was 94 when he came over, and his first match was against Ric Flair in July of 94. So the parade was in that spring.
Yeah. So it's huge, but no, the Savage part of the story gets completely forgotten.
It does.
But in this era, it's gigantic. It is gigantic.
And of course, we know that you're going to wind up, you spend a little bit of time with him, a cup of coffee with him in the WWF, but you're going to follow suit. You're going to wind up in WCW come 1996, and Randy Savage is there, and he's a big part of this NWO storyline. There's been lots of rumor and innuendo, about him being paranoid and boy, he'd lock Liz in a broom closet and all these stories about how high strung and tightly wound he was. Was that your experience in working with him, whether it was in Memphis and seeing how he operated as a young man in the WWF when he visited Memphis for those cups of coffee in the early 90s, or here in WCW? How much of that is just hyperbole and boy, guys just like to talk, and how much was, oh no, Randy was pretty high strung and pretty paranoid?
Here's a little story behind the story that one of those tidbits of a memory came back, Conrad, last night. So how I've talked on here that, and I've done different interviews, but certainly on the podcast. Oh, what's the difference and all this? Randy's, I mean, I don't want to say it was the first Nitro I did, but it was early. And we called up and, hey man, how is everybody? And, and he would tell me how much, we would reconnect, how much he respected. And he would tell some different stories and he would ask, whatever happened to this guy or that guy. Anyway, we would just kind of catch up. But Randy, if he wasn't the first, he was certainly the most direct in that this place, as in WCW, it's not like any place you've ever worked before. You better watch out. You better look over your shoulder. There's not one boss. It's a corporate environment. It's a different set of rules, a different set of circumstances. Anything you learned about the territories, kiss it goodbye. This ain't working for Vince McMahon. It is a dog eat dog world. And it came with an extra dose of, on the one hand, you could say paranoia, but on the other hand, it's the extra heaping and dose of compassion and desire and competitiveness. He absolutely read the room right. Now, two sides of that. Yes, I think Randy at times may have been paranoia, but he also, as I've learned through life, how you going to argue with success? Randy was successful at both places, made a lot of money. But as time went on, I think the marriage took its toll in so many different ways, and that's not what this podcast is about at all. But that I felt for sure weighed on Randy's heart. I think this is the beginning of all those kind of life events. Life hits hard, life hits fast, and life hits unapologetic. And I think as we have the luxury to look hindsight 2020, these are the early days. But Randy again was really good to me, but he's the one who really spelled it out for me on my first run in WCW. You're working into a corporate environment and there's snakes everywhere.
You don't share a ring with him very often in WCW. We mentioned, that match at Uncensored, Team NWO and Team Piper and blah, blah, blah. We also mentioned the whole Thunder Battle Royal. That was really crazy because that actually happens on May 2nd, 2000. So just a few weeks ago was 24 years ago.
Crazy.
And it was pretty crazy because there's 41 guys here, including Bret Hart, but more importantly, Randy Savage, who at this point wasn't even under contract to WCW, but we're bringing him in. And the idea that, I don't know, it always just sort of stuck out like a sore thumb that.
All right.
Go ahead.
Dave, pull that picture up. Folks, we're on YouTube right now. Check it out. Look across the ring at 41 people.
Let me tell you all the people who were in this.
I was going to say
Ric Flair, Asia, Bam Bam Bigelow, Big Ron Reese, Big T, Big Vito, Billy Kidman, Brian Adams, Brian Clark, Buff Bagwell, Cassius, Chavo Guerrero Jr., Chris Candido, Chris Canyon, Kurt Hennig, Diamond Dallas Page, Disco Inferno, Heavy D, Horace Hogan, Hugh Morris, Hulk Hogan, Jeff Jarrett, Jim Duggan, Johnny the Bull, Conan, Medusa, Mike Awesome, Mona, Norman Smiley, Randy Savage, Rey Mysterio Jr., Scott Steiner, Shane Douglas, Sean Stasiak, Stevie Ray, Sting, Tank Abbott, The Cat, The Wall, Vampiro, and Van Hammer. And this all happens at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee. And this is the next to last match that Randy Savage ever had. This is his very last appearance in WCW. This is wrestling history at the Mid-South Coliseum, but why the hell was Randy Savage in it?
I got to ask you this, bro. Who was writing TV at this time?
That would be Vince Russo.
I didn't know. I really didn't.
Eric
know.
Bischoff and Vince Russo are together, but essentially it's Vince Russo writing the shows and Bischoff saying that works for Hulk. And that's it.
41-man battle royal.
And we bring in Randy Savage as an extra added attraction. And what do we do with him? Let's throw him in there with 40 other people. What?
Oh, I'd love to. No, I wouldn't. Because my brain would hurt again.
Well,
anyway, in the Mid-South Coliseum.
In the Mid-South Coliseum, a place where you have had more than your fair share of erections. And if you'd like to have a few more, can we recommend BlueChew? That's right, boys and girls. Way back when old Double J, he'd pop a Woodrow anytime they pulled in to the parking lot at the Mid-South Coliseum, because he gets excited about giving people guitar necklaces, and he can be ready anytime now, thanks to BlueChew. You see, BlueChew is a unique online service that delivers you the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night. So you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. And the process is simple. You'll sign up at BlueChew.com. You'll consult with one of their licensed medical providers. And once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And here's the best part. It's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. BlueChew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. But there won't be anything discreet about your package. BlueChew wants to help you have better sex, so discover your options at BlueChew.com. Let's chew it and do it. We've got a special deal for our listeners. Try BlueChew free when you use our promo code MyWorld at checkout. Just pay the $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is MyWorld, and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank BlueChew for sponsoring today's podcast. And we want to thank everybody for hanging out with adfreeshows.com. We've got a live studio audience hanging out with us today. We want to give a special shout out to Josh Henney, who's here, and Alex Wheaton, and I know Denovius Mack and Coach Keith and Doug Ritter and Coach Rosie. We got a packed house here, including Mr. Epic and Eric Green and others. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. And I also want to mention, we've got a ton of great bonus content. We just dropped our latest episode of Lex Express with Lex Luger over the weekend, where folks get to interact with the total package himself. And before that, we had a 2.5 hour conversation with the former Devon Storm. You may remember him more as Crowbar. I've heard incredibly positive feedback about that and all of our false finish series. We've also now got your Saturday mornings covered. It's Saturdays with the Blue Meanie. We're calling it Mornings with Meanie. And this week alone, Ad-Free Shows members are going to get a live Q&A with Eric Bischoff, and then later another with myself. These are interactive Q&As, and we're even going to have you on next Thursday. The live Q&A is a part of adfreeshows.com. If you haven't already checked it out, what are you waiting for? You see quite a lineup that we've got there, including Lex Luger, Kevin Sullivan, David Crockett, the Blue Meanie, Mike Chioda, Nick Patrick, plus all your favorite hosts like Eric Bischoff and Tony Schiavone and Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard. Something for everybody. Over 100,000 hours of bonus content is waiting for you, including every panel we've ever done at StarCast at adfreeshows.com. So let's talk a little bit about the end of Randy Savage in wrestling. I can't believe this is real, but it happened in TNA. Meltzer wrote this: there was certainly speculation, and being wrestling there would be, that the Hogan Savage thing was a work on their part without letting the company in on it. I don't think it was. I'd go so far as to say I'm pretty sure on this one. The idea that Savage would walk out just a few hours before showtime, causing them to have to rewrite the entire show, which Savage was prominently figured into, makes me think that isn't the case. Although if it is, nobody believes the company was part of it. Let's just time out right there. Randy Savage, man, controversy just follows him around a little bit. I know how highly you thought of him and his career. And I know how much he had to think of your dad for allowing him the opportunity to really go have this national career. When you guys are first having conversations about Randy Savage and TNA, does your dad bring it up? Do you bring it up? Is everybody bullish on the idea? And why did it take a while to get him to come darken the doors of Impact?
I can't recall who would, I think it's semantics, who actually came up with the first kind of thought process, or hey man, what about Randy? But the mindset and the thing that I kind of correspond this with is that in these early days, 02, 03, 04, and we had Sting in and out just a little bit, but we knew we needed, not one, but we would have hoped a couple of, we'll call it brand ambassadors. And so my dad asked me, hey, you may reach out to Randy. And I was like, yeah. And the first conversations that he had with Randy, in a lot of ways, it was disheartening, because my dad would just say, and I want to make sure I say this respectfully, but Randy just wasn't the same guy that my dad had been dealing or had dealt with. Like we alluded to, life circumstances. Randy had done the Spider-Man movie. Wrestling was, how are you going to follow, we'll call it his golden era of wrestling at Mania, and then the WCW run, and we're a startup. And he had done a Spider-Man movie. He had wanted to get into to do more movies. The rap album. He had different people coming at him, wanted to monetize him in certain ways. And so I'll just say Randy's career in so many ways was at a crossroads. But my dad, I'll say, tugged on the heartstrings, and it kind of worked on Randy. And we're going to get into some of these reports here that from the Meltzer sheets. And I'm just going to say, diplomatically, Connie, I mean, it's completely fiction. It's just, but I have to take it and understand in defense of Dave, whether it's Hogan's camp or whether it was maybe a little bit of Randy's camp, or maybe it was both sides that just wanted to create some kind of narrative. But from the very beginning conversations that I had with Randy and my dad had with Randy was, hey, Randy, we want you a part of the product. That doesn't have to say you're going to wrestle every month or one time or 5 times. You got to tell us what you want to do. We want you to be a brand ambassador. And he just wasn't real sure, obviously, where we were going to go, where the brand was going to go, the ups and downs, obviously, with Randy, how much money's involved, all those kind of things. And as we continue those negotiations, they would get hot and get cold, and hot and get cold, just like Hogan's. Hogan's would get, we've documented that, hot and get cold, hot and get cold. So we never wanted to press Randy and say, hey, here's the deal. Here's what we want you to do. You kind of tell us, how can we collaborate? Those were the conversations all the way throughout the whole deal. But then, like I said, Randy was not the same Randy that we had, and I say me and my father have been dealing with for the last 20 years.
I mean, I don't want to make assumptions, so I just want to clarify, and I get you're trying to be respectful, but I feel like I'm reading between the lines that perhaps you felt like Randy was experimenting a little bit in this era.
No, I don't. I'm not going down that road at all. It's that Randy, the paranoia, and his head was not in the game at all. Like, hey, Randy, we're going to make this easy on you. What do you want to do for TNA wrestling? And some days it would be brand ambassador. I'll meet, with any kind of licensee or international, or I'll be your spokesman. Hey, what about if you're general manager for a 6-week run as an on-air talent? I mean, kind of the amount of things we tabled and suggested were unlimited, and he would be hot or cold. His personal life, I'm not talking about that at all. It's that maybe respectfully, I'll say wishy-washy. Nothing could ever get confirmed, ever. My dad got frustrated multiple times and said, son, let's just move on. Okay, Dad, you're kind of running point on this. And then, as I later found out, my dad, I'm not real sure where his head was at, because he was beginning to get on the outs of Panda. And that wasn't all, it was a rocky situation. And I never put a ton of stock into it either way. But it was never contentious. It was just never complete. Ever.
Brian Adams goes, on the Cowhead radio show in Tampa, and Brian Adams is tight with Randy Savage in this era. Very. And he's critical of how you and your dad, it's just said the Jarrett's, were treating his buddy Randy Savage. He said they had snuck Savage into the building to keep his appearance a secret, but then Hogan walked in where fans could see he was there, and everyone made a big deal about Hogan being there when they knew Savage hated him. He said the Jarrett's knew it was unprofessional. I guess Savage felt like if he was there, that nobody he likes or doesn't like should be allowed to be there. It's unprofessional. This is directly from the Observer. Hogan was very popular with all the guys and was telling people that he'd been talking to Vince, but Vince wants him to come in and just put guys over, and he doesn't want to do that. Hogan was told that for the first time, because Vince's business is so bad, TNA is more high profile on FSN right now, and the ball is in his court more than Vince's. Savage was also said to be nice to everyone. Some were concerned about him mentally because they know how he had been in the past, and he didn't seem to remember some folks that he had worked with a lot in the past. He was friendly to everyone and did say, for the sake of the business, if Hogan came in, He'd work at trying to get along with him and would do a feud if he was asked. I find all of this fascinating. Talk to me a little bit about, was there an issue with Randy being there at the same time Hogan was?
All right. So you got to factor in Jimmy Hart on some level.
I want to mention that Savage has even demanded, this is a report from the Observer, that if I come back, Jimmy Hart has to stay away from me the entire time or else I'm not going to be there. And I guess there was a nasty confrontation between Jimmy Hart and Randy Savage. They were arguing about Hulk Hogan on the Man Cow radio show before, and he's on Savage's no fly list now too. And the idea that somebody doesn't like Jimmy Hart to me is baffling.
So can you give a real 30,000 viewpoint where the Hogan Savage relationship or the backstory? Because I believe this was right during the era of the all-time worst, because they later reconciled and all that, but they were estranged at this time.
Well, Hogan says they reconciled. Did they really?
Okay.
Hogan also body slammed Andre the Giant. He died the next day, brother.
Okay. So I don't know. Here's what I do know is by Randy's request, he always wanted to fly under the radar.
Yes.
And okay, Randy, that's it. We won't make a big to do about it. When you come in and out, you tell us what you want to do. That was that. Hogan showing up unexpectedly from the time he showed up. And look, you got to remember my father and Hogan's relationship, the Memphis and the Hulk up is the Jerry Lawler, pull your strap down. All the lineage and the deep roots of Hogan and my dad and Lawler and, just all of it goes way, way back. But Hogan showing up and making some noise strategically, how long was it before he was back on SmackDown after this era? Not long. I don't think long at all. I think was inside of 12 months, but it was much to do about nothing, because we had kind of flirted with Hulk as well. But at this time frame of everything, we weren't having conversations with Hulk about him coming on board. The other 10 times we did prior to this, but at this time, and it was just much ado about nothing. They're both Florida guys, both live in Tampa, and they both made the drive over. And I think we're just kind of kicking the tires. And it was said back then, and I had no reason to believe it wasn't true. Oh, Hogan's just kind of jerking the WWF's chain. He's just letting folks know he's there. So he advertised he was going to be there to whoever would listen. And Savage was really trying to do a little business with us, or wasn't sure of it, but he was kicking the tires to truly, again, he was at a different place in his career. He did not want to, his health, his physical health. He wasn't the same Macho Man. Just all the uncertainties of a guy who's just unsure of himself as far as from a physical component. And then I don't think he really knew where he wanted his career to go. I mean, when you think about the Randy Savage rap album, what was the mindset there? I don't know. And again, the Hollywood avenue that I know at times he wanted to, and then that never went anywhere. So I'm trying to just kind of say it as soft as I can. He was really at a mental crossroads in his life. And when you have a super competitive guy like Randy, it wasn't easy on him at all.
So not easy that he no shows. You guys don't give up on him because he's a big star. You keep talking. A few days later, and it's decided, okay, let's go ahead and announce the match. Turning Point, December 5th. That's what we're looking for in Orlando, Universal Studios. It's going to be Savage, Jeff Hardy, and AJ Styles taking on Jeff Jarrett, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall. That's the way it was announced originally. We know that that's going to change up a little bit. But how about this? Jarrett, Hall, and Nash are going to come out and beat up on the Three Faces as well as Shark Boy. And then here comes Savage. He's got this big coat on, doesn't take it off again, but he's going to punch you. And the heels are going to continue to taunt Savage from the ramp. But when you saw Randy, like, hey, here's what I'm wearing on TV: black hat, black gloves, black long leather jacket, black pants, black belt. I mean, I know that this is a unique look for Randy. Do you think he was self-conscious about being big enough? And that's the reason he's wearing all black like that.
Well, black makes you look small to begin with, but here was what I was mesmerized. Okay, so if you would have put Madness on that shirt, he would have looked like he did in WCW in the late 90s. Did he look like the superpowers? Of course not. Did he look like IC champ? Of course not. Did he look like Macho Madness? No. But did he look good? Yeah.
But I'm just saying he's wrestling in a t-shirt and he's wearing a full black coat. I know you said, oh, black makes you smaller, but he's essentially wearing a bodysuit here.
Is that the worst thing when you kind of look back over the history of Randy's career?
No, not at all. I'm not saying anything's bad about it. You've said pretty clearly that mentally he was at a crossroads and struggling. I'm just wondering, do you think him not presenting like he used to was part of that?
Yes.
Okay.
I think he was insecure about himself, presentation wise. And I can remember my dad telling him, Randy, you look great. You look fantastic. You're not going to look like you're 25 years old. And when I look at those pictures of Scott and Kevin in those Elvis suits, we did a pre-tape and those guys cracked me up for 2 hours. And I'm like, guys, I got to get back to producing and getting things done. But that 6-man tag was one for the ages, but we worked around everything. And I remember me and AJ, and I'm like, AJ, me and you, pal, we just got to figure this thing out. And we did. Look, is it a Mac Classic? No. But it was what it was.
It was written. The match was, here's what's written.
Oh boy.
Hall, Nash, and Jarrett before the show, being that they're the kings of wrestling, dressed up like Elvis in jumpsuits with Elvis wigs. They also did this angle where a car drove away and they acted as if they'd beaten up Savage, threw him in a car, and he was kidnapped. This was actually done because Savage couldn't wrestle and they were trying to hide that fact. So when the match began, it was 2-on-3. Hall and Nash wore the jumpsuits, so they looked like giant clowns. The jumpsuits were to hide their physiques, although Nash is in great cosmetic shape. But I couldn't hide their faces, as both, particularly Hall, have aged greatly. Hall looks like an aging wino, which is what he is. Nash, because of his gray hair, looked like a 55-year-old former NBA player like Phil Jackson or someone. They even came out to the old Flying Elvis's theme music. Hall tried, but it was like an out-of-shape guy trying to keep up. Jarrett and Styles were there to carry the match, and Styles really worked for 5 people, but that wasn't enough. Although the match was more than decent when he was in, that was most of the way. He made a cold tag to Hardy, and the match fell apart from there. Hardy had Hall pinned when Nash pulled referee Andrew Thomas out of the ring. Hall hit Hardy with a guitar shot. Savage finally showed up, and he somehow made Hall and Nash look youthful. Backstage, I was told Savage looked 100 years old. I thought on TV he didn't look a day over 60. Although he did look older than Lou Thez did when I saw him wrestle in 96, back when Lou was 80. Savage threw a few punches and put Jarrett in a sleeper. Jarrett tried a sunset flip. Savage blocked it, punched Jarrett to the head, and got the pin. Boy, Meltzer ate it up, but as you said, it's not a Matt Classic, but fans wanted to see Randy Savage. They saw it. It was a fun nostalgia night. Fans went home happy. I didn't have an expectation that it was going to be Bryan Danielson and Kenny Omega in there that night.
No, and when you go back and watch it, or even the highlights of it, it's, and I get it. Meltzer's wanting a Matt Classic and everything that goes with it, but it was a story. And what year was this?
04.
December of 04. Yeah. Gosh almighty. You just kind of think about where we were as a company. Was it a 5-star Matt Classic? No, but was it a story? And we got Savage in a match, and it was what it was.
Let's talk about the expectation management, because ahead of the match, it was written in the Observer, Randy Savage's deal is for 8 dates. His demands to return after he walked out the first time, which TNA acquiesced to, even though some people thought some of these demands were ridiculous. He won limo service from his home in Tampa to Orlando for every show. He wanted 2 security guards at $1,000 per night, which is more than what all but the top wrestlers in the group are earning. Jimmy Hart can't be anywhere near him. And he also couldn't be in the truck or on the headsets anytime he's on television. Now, of course, you might be thinking, does Jimmy Hart ever work in the truck? He does not. But when Savage was out, he had Harris watching the gorilla position to make sure that Jimmy Hart doesn't come in there. In an 85-degree weather, Savage took his jacket off only once. Those who saw him said his arm looked shriveled up and that he's either going to have to work with a long sleeve shirt or have to make some quick changes if he's actually going to wrestle. Savage also demanded his own private dressing room, I guess to make sure nobody saw the physical changes we just wrote about. So there's a lot written about what it took to get Randy to come back. How much of this is real? How much of that is fiction?
Well, and I get it. Dave's getting his word count, and I've got a ton of respect for that. But do we really think we're going to put Randy, hey, dress down and cater it? No. And a car service. Hey, Randy, how do you want to handle this? We'll send a car after you. How would you like to do it? Because I don't think you want to fly from Tampa to Orlando. You want us just all of it's just Jimmy Hart working the truck. It's just nonsense. There's no validity whatsoever to it. The 8 dates is what I chuckled about, thinking that is complete fabrication. Where did people get that? I mean, it's complete fiction. Complete fiction.
Okay. So it was always a per night deal?
Yes.
Okay.
Randy had no interest, and we didn't either, in signing any kind of long-term deal.
Because you couldn't afford it. Right?
Not only could afford it. Remember, I'm trying to say this diplomatically. My dad, who knew Randy.
Yeah, this isn't the old Randy. I got you.
Yeah, he's just like, hey, let's ease through this. And if we get to a spot where we think we need to do something long-term, let's do it. Other than that, let's just kind of work our way through this. And, Randy had no problem signing releases or day ofs and all this. Again, Randy didn't want a long-term deal. So it was, in the words of Dutch Mantel, run a wrestler.
The finish is Randy Savage pinning you in this 6-man at the pay-per-view, and you're the champ. So Tenay is pushing in commentary. He just pinned the champion. He's got to get a title shot. And I guess Meltzer says when talking over the idea of the January 16th title match, which would be the January pay-per-view, Savage refused to do the job. And when he found out that was the plan, left again. Meltzer would say, quite frankly, it serves them right because the results of the title match should have been told to Savage, and they should have had something on paper with him so they could take legal recourse for screwing up their storylines. Now, of course, you said, hey, we never had a long-term contract. It was an idea. Was that the idea? Let's get him in the 6-man. Let's let him go over. If he pins me, that gives us an opportunity to build to that match. And if it's a one-off, on down the road we go. Was that the thinking going into that?
You're not going to beat Hall. You're not going to beat Nash. Let's highlight Randy. What's it going to hurt for the champion to do a job? Oh, that's right. Jeff doesn't do jobs. Okay. Let him do a job to Macho Man. We never considered, hey, Randy, you want to work a single? Oh yeah. You really only wanted to work a 6-man tag and be out there for 3 or 4 minutes. But no, the logic tells us, yeah, we're going to book Randy the following month in a single main event. That's just nonsense. Complete fiction on the sheet writer's part. Completely.
You do a big confrontation with Dusty, and Savage's name is never mentioned. I guess we want to at least be open to the idea of putting something together in the future.
Yeah.
The Observer had this to say. A few we've talked to in the company shared the viewpoint on Savage we mentioned here, although it's more the problem of how the company handled it and not any defense of Savage. The belief is when you're talking with a guy like Savage at that level, you should lay out the entire program and get a contract signature and agreement even before starting the program. Well, he just goes off here, and it does feel like there's a lot of assumptions made. Like you had him on contract, but you just didn't discuss creative. And you're saying the whole premise of that's wrong. We didn't have 8 dates. It was a one-off. And maybe if he likes it, we'll do more.
Yeah. Total.
My goodness.
Yeah, that goes.
What could have been?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, look, when you talk about '04 and you have Savage a part of your sizzle reel and a main event and go through that laundry list of talent that we had, um, Randy, I know there was conversations that he told my dad, nope, you guys don't owe me a penny. I mean, just the whole tone of the relationship was more kind of Randy working with the Jarrett's. Let's see where it goes. But again, different Randy didn't want any commitments, and I get it. But this tone of dealing with the Macho Man of 1988 or even 1998, it just that wasn't the reality at all.
Have you put it together until this very moment as we're talking right now that you took pins in Randy Savage and Ric Flair's last ever matches? Randy's last match, Jeff Jarrett. Ric Flair's last match, Jeff Jarrett. How about that?
How about that, Conrad? Remember, I've said don't believe in coincidences, only convergences. Let me tell you another one that just kind of, and I don't know because it wasn't the same day. You kind of remember death dates,
Right. Today was the day that Randy passed away as we're recording.
You're kidding me.
13 years ago today, May 20th, 2011. We're recording on a Monday, folks. So yeah, May 20th, 2011. This is when Randy Savage had a heart attack and ultimately passed away while driving.
I was driving down the road doing media. Got a text, and then I talked to somebody back at the TNA offices. Yeah, and I was by myself, and I kind of had the thoughts on that day, and I'm just like, because the first, the heart attack, and he was in the car. There was a little bit of conflicting reports for about an hour, I don't know, hour or two, but yeah. But no, wow, here we are, Connie. No, but yeah, as you know, I've done some painting and reconstruction and fixed a couple of things in my office and all this. So over there on one of my side desks, uh, the what do you? I hate to call it a program, but the program for my mother's funeral uh, was in a stack in Karen's grandfather and all this. But my mother, her service was on February the 21st. My father passed away on February 14th. His service was a week later on February 21st.
Wow.
Same day, 3 years apart.
What a small, crazy world we live in, Tom, you know?
It bizarre. I mean, it's really, really bizarre.
Your opinion, and that's what this would be, just your opinion. I mean, I don't know. You worked in the office, maybe you know. Why do you think Randy never went back to the WWE? Like after WCW went down, everybody went back. I mean, everybody. And Randy never did. Like after he left Vince the first time, that was it. And there's been lots of silly speculation over the years, but what say you? Why do you think Randy never mended fences with the WWE and went back?
There, you talk about a story behind the story behind the story. I have no idea because when you look at the golden era, just when you kind of look at where things, how you can monetize different things, the Macho Man and the glasses and the merch and the psychedelic and the tie dye and all the different things and the way Randy could have been monetized. There's obviously much more to the story than meets the eye. I am not qualified to answer that at all because I truly don't know. But when I think of all the opportunities that have not been seized upon since 2001 or whatever it may be, um, kind of we don't know. I mean, we obviously don't know because think about the money that a publicly traded company could have been making. I mean, when you think about the Hogan merch and the Warrior and just all the different merch items through the years, we're talking millions, and it was never the door was never open. Was that a Randy deal or a WWE deal or both? I'm asking. Do you know? Because I don't have a clue, but I've wondered that many, many times.
Well, I'm sure you heard the silly rumor.
Yes.
When do you remember first hearing that? Is that in the last like 20 years, or were you hearing it even when he was active in the business?
Oh, no, no. Yeah, but I'd say for sure. I say 10, no, two. No, okay. Last 20 years. Yeah, I'll say that.
So not while you guys were in WCW together.
Heck no.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I think it's nonsense, but what do you think his legacy in the business is going to be? I mean, when I talked to Jim Hurd several years ago at the very start of the pandemic, we did a whole conversations with Conrad for adfreeshows.com. And he was pretty straight up and saying one of the first things he tried to do when he took over WCW was sign Randy Savage. He felt like he couldn't land Hulk Hogan, but he thought kids would love Randy Savage. And he even did a Macho Man impression. He said kids love to do that. It's just a part of pop culture. And he felt like Randy Savage could have blown the roof off of WCW and been a real competitor for Hulk Hogan in the WWF. We know it didn't happen for Hurt. And by the time he did come, even when he was figured in as the top guy, it never felt like he achieved the same success in WCW that he did in the WWF. I'm curious, what do you think his legacy will wind up being? Will it be the Hogan angle? Will it be as the Intercontinental Champion? Will it be, the Matt Classic at WrestleMania 3? Will it be Slim Jims? What do you think his legacy on wrestling is going to be?
God, coming from me, I may be jaded on it because I go back kind of to his entrepreneurial spirit and his father-son relationship and him being a promoter at the same time as a talent. But I think when you pull all the way back and not 30,000, but maybe kind of even 50 or 55,000, he may be the first national or international star that bled into pop culture with a brand. The Slim Jim account, and I know slap into it and all that kind of stuff, we can have fun with it. But when you talk about a talent bringing a national account, and now there's Logan Paul and Prime, and there's with professional wrestling, sports entertainment, we have DraftKings and different things, and Ric Flair's Woo Energy, and then you kind of look at all the sponsors and all this. But when you look at the era that Vince owned everything lock, stock, and barrel, that Slim Jim came onto the account, got Randy. He became that larger than life mega talent that was truly an influence. He influenced a brand to follow him. They weren't alignment with the WWF brand. They were in alignment with the Macho Man Randy Savage brand. And I think his legacy was that core IP that he created of the Macho Man Randy Savage was truly an IP he created that was not just larger than life. And I think that was kind of at the core too, maybe of him and Vince's falling out, or even WWE and him falling out. He was a big brand. The Macho Man brand is probably his legacy. I don't know, man. That's hard for me to put into words. You got anything? Just a snapshot of what you think his legacy would be?
I think you sort of nailed it in that he created his own IP that had value. I mean, how many people do we see leave the WWF and still have an endorsement deal? Yeah. Normally, a lot of those endorsement deals are just tied to, their presence on that promotion, but he took it with him. I mean, he didn't get it because of WWE. I think for better or worse, it's Slim Jims. I mean, you roll into any gas station here in America, there's probably a package with his name and face on it right now. And crazy. That means his family's probably cashing a check there. His estate is. So good for them. Let's do a few questions. Carl Hayes says, if Randy went to the NWA instead of the WWF, how do you think him versus Flair, the Horseman, and Sting could have compared to his WWF run versus Hulk, Steamboat, and Warrior.
No comparison. And I'm going back not to Randy's fault, not to Flair's fault, Horseman, Sting. The machine of creating episodic, larger than life, big money matches. In so many ways, you just think of the synonymous brand value of the Hulkster and Macho Man, and then plug in whatever heels you may want. It was in babyface. It was Randy was a huge part of creating sports entertainment.
Dan,
and I say, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just say that in that I think the professional wrestling was the word accurately used, and the territories. And then when it went national, that's when Vince really tried to create that phrase sports entertainment. I still say to this day, it's the same thing. It was just done new in the mid 80s when Macho Man and Hulk and those guys exploded onto the scene.
Dan Anderson wants to know, was there ever an opportunity for Lanny in TNA, whether it was on camera or behind the scenes?
Nope. And there was never any interest shown on their part. And at that point, for the most part, I think Lanny was retired.
When Randy came in, did you try to get Slim Jim on board to advertise?
I am sure we had a conversation or two, but we didn't have the real estate for it. Or we weren't that kind of product. I wish we were at those stage, but we were not that kind of product.
Lenny Bakken says, when Savage won the title in 88, was Jeff or Jerry at all surprised by his very quick ascent to the top, considering only a few years prior, he was in the Memphis territory?
My man, Lenny, our man, Lenny, good old Lenny. Look, that's a two different questions. For me, I was mesmerized. I don't know about my dad, but I was just mesmerized that this is the same guy that was running up and down the roads to the territory in 88. I'm in the business less than 2 years, and Randy is sitting on top of the world. I was mesmerized. It's I think the best word. Surprised, kind of, but in all of it.
Matt wants to know, did you ever have a match with Randy where he scripted out the entire thing, as we've heard he used to do? Was that a part of the 6-man? Was he that detailed in that one, or is that not maybe a fair comparison?
That stage is all he wanted to know was Randy come in, kick ass, sleeper, come out of that, duck, sunset flip, pin me.
Got it.
That simple.
Enigmatic Vein says, not a question, but a thank you for bringing Randy back one more time. It turned out to be the end, but at least we got to see him a few more times on TV. I think we all agree with that. Thanks you, Jeff. One last time. I know I'm not booked. Terry says, what does Jeff know about the Dundee Poffo incident outside the gym? Is this one of the gun stories?
Yeah, yes, that's the Waffle House. Dutch tells a glowingly fascinating version of it. I wasn't a firsthand witness, and certainly wasn't working the territory. That was before I had started. But it is, it's legendary that there were several run-ins. This gym that I believe they're talking about is right down here, Conrad, at the Rivergate Mall. It's what was the name of that? Oh, Health. Oh, I'll think of the name of the gym after we get done. But yeah, again, Randy waiting on Bill to leave the gym.
Do you know what Randy
Crazy times.
Do you know what Randy thought of Jay Lethal's impression of him?
So, little footnote: Lanny and Jay were big buddies.
Yes.
And so Randy, I don't want to say he was over the top about it. That ain't Randy's style, but he was, he thought it was very cool. And you got to remember, probably to a nuisance part, wherever Randy went, people always wanted to impersonate him.
Yes.
And I mean, that just was a part of his everyday living and life and everything that went with it. But he understood that Jay Lethal was a huge fan of the Macho Man and Rick. I mean, that's part of Jay's fandom. But there wasn't any, uh, there's not any story I got for you. Just Randy thought it was a good one, and he was respectful.
Francis Reyes wants to know, did Savage give you any good advice that helped you out in your personal life and or career?
To this day, when guys come up to me and they're not real sure, whatever it may be, and it's not just the wrestling business. Randy was very adamant about, and this, I'm going back to hearing my father talk about him and my grandmother and my grandfather and just kind of his business acumen and his entrepreneurial spirit. But Randy always had a mindset of stay in the game. And then his follow-up kind of principle that he always liked to talk about is don't jump without a net. He and that's not jumping promotion to promotion. He's saying just be strategic um in your business moves. And he probably learned some life lessons in ICW, and he probably jumped a few times without a net, probably took himself out of the game, and he figured out from Watts and others, guidance. Hey man, get back in the game and see what happens. And on certain, no matter what kind of business deal, I'll think of those kind of things. A few guys have told me, hey man, don't worry about how to get up in the air. Figure first thing you got to do is for today is try to figure out how you can actually just get up on the runway. You don't have to fly the plane yet. Get up on the runway. And that's kind of in simple terms, one day at a time. Figure out what you can do today to move your business initiative forward.
Here's a great question from Carlos Estrada. He says, if Randy were still with us today, does Jeff think he would have a job in creative or another part of the pro wrestling business? The Macho podcast, the Macho cast, the Savage cast would be huge, but what do you think he'd be doing in wrestling today?
That's a good question, Carlos. My gut tells me, oh man, he like the legendary stories about Randy and his father. His father, I think, did a gimmick as the miser, but they saved every penny. So Randy would be living on the beach. And I don't think he would want to be in the business day to day, but we'll kind of just play the tape forward and have a little fun with it. I mean, he'd be a hell of a VO artist, but I think there would be some kind of way that Randy would be monetizing uh, his merchandise, his IP, if you will. Maybe a clothing line, maybe cologne. He would be merchandising because the Macho Man is so, man, it has so much testosterone in it, if you will. Somehow, some way, they would figure out how to create a licensing brand, a line of things. They could do this today because his IP is still being monetized.
Marty B wants to know, as fans, we all spend time debating what wrestlers' best matches were. Do you know what matches stood out to Randy that he thought was his best work?
I wish I did. I wish I did. Randy, well, thought I had last night, I'll share it, is that coming into WCW, Randy had the conversation with me, hey man, you're a bump taking heel, you know how to feed the comeback. That was kind of a staple that he loved for heels to make the baby faces look like Superman. And, he's like, yeah, you learned how to take bumps because Lawler gave him, the reality is Lawler didn't make me take a lot of bumps, but just that whole mindset of making your opponent look great. And Randy did that through his whole career.
Justin Hannah wants to know, whose idea was it for Randy to pile drive Ricky Morton through that table?
Well, that's a good question. Lawler could maybe answer that. I have no idea whose idea it was, but man, that is a legendary clip, if you will, from Mid-South Coliseum.
We got a couple of questions about Outlaw stuff. Mitchell wants to know, Jeff, I've always been a bit confused on the relationship between the CWA and ICW. ICW was an Outlaw promotion in CWA's territory. So why did the CWA then allow ICW on CWA television? Could you talk us through a little bit more about the relationship and how it worked with the two rival promotions. I think we kind of did that, but
We covered.
I think the idea that this outlaw promotion term is something that people got really familiar with on Jim Cornette's podcast. But it's not really applicable, I don't think, today the way it was back then.
No.
Friend of the show, Ed, says, are there any general views on outlaw promotions like the ICW? Were there cases when some were more acceptable by NWA promoters based on their footprint, maybe how often they ran, whether they had a television presence? I assume the wrestlers liked having more places to work, but could people be blackballed if they work for certain outlaw promotions? Please get 100% granular.
Well, I mean, gosh, it's such a different era, but the term outlaw, I think, and again, I'm not the authority on this because I'm the son of a promoter. And by the time I started, 86, but outlaw came from, usually they didn't have TV. And if they did have TV, it was low budget and they didn't have a lot of money. And because as soon as guys could get booked by territory promoters, their pay went up, they had more work. And it was just kind of these guys that were trying to give it a go on it. And you weren't blackballed. Now, if you did some things, Jack Pfeffer, there are other guys that would do certain things. And blackball, to me, that's a term that's really thrown around. And the reality is, well, I think it blackballed through the years, but even that, it's kind of like, how many times was Sid or Warrior blackballed from Vince? 15, and they came back 16. It's like, you're blackballed until we need you. I mean, that's pretty much, I think that was always my understanding. But the differentiation between an outlaw promotion and the territory is most of the time the territories were recognized by other territories and outlaws weren't.
We got a few questions from our live studio audience we should hit. Josh Henney wants to know, did you ever take Randy's elbow off the top rope? If so, how stiff was it?
You know what? I did not. And I just saw on Twitter recently, our buddy Charles Robinson, I'd forgotten about. He took one for the ages. Let's just say that.
Collapse lung, the whole deal.
Yeah.
Aaron Sheen says, did Randy see the Spider-Man movie as a way to get into Hollywood and eventually leave wrestling? Of course, we know Bonesaw McGraw was his character there. Do you think he thought, hey man, that's my ticket to the big time right here? It was a little later in life, but didn't really happen the way maybe he thought.
He was hopeful to get more parts. I do know that. There's no question. That's what I mean by, the crosswords of his career. Could he make it in Hollywood? Did he want to make it in Hollywood? I just think Randy, again, he wasn't doing anything at this stage of his life for money. He was unbelievably frugal, legendary. I mean, he forgot more things than even Mick Foley knows about saving money. No, Randy was legendary about saving money. So at this stage of his life, he did nothing for money.
He would get a chuckle out of seeing that his Bonesaw outfit, the actual outfit he wore in Spider-Man, has been listed on eBay for, I don't know, over a decade for like $75,000. He would think that was hilarious. Someone who wants to keep it real bad.
Okay.
Doug Ritter says, this is fun, topical for us. Do you think we'll be able to get the new Double J ringside collectible figure in time for Top Guy weekend? Man, we should mention that. You've been crushing it over at Ringside Collectibles. What have you been hearing about your new figure?
I wish I knew, but I guess that thing is created quite the buzz, Connie. Old last outlaw. But no, I am not the expert on that. I know that they did say something along, and I may be corrected on this, but coming in August. So
hey now, we might be there.
I think it may be there, Doug.
Well, next week, Jeff, we're going to be getting in our Wayback Machine. We're going 20 years back to 2004. We'll be talking about March of April of 04, the fallout for the Ring of Honor controversy, the new Fox Sportsnet deal, your relationship with Dana White, whatever it was 20 years ago, plus AJ Styles as the NWA champion, rolling out the new World Cup, Ron Killings, and so much more. That's coming your way next week here on My World. In the meantime, check out how affordable advertising here can be. If you're looking for men 25 to 54, no better place to look for than advertisewithjarrett.com. That's advertisewithjarrett.com. Also want to mention that your home for all things Double J is myworldpod.com. If you haven't already, go hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications bell, and throw us a like over at our official YouTube, myworldpod.com. We got a ton of great merch available for you now as well at shopdoublej.com. That's shopdoublej.com. And we'll be back next week, man. But you've got a crazy week this week between Dynamite and Collision and Double or Nothing. My goodness, it's going to be a busy week here on My World. But stay tuned, folks. More Double J coming your way next week right here on My World.
Hey guys, Eric Bischoff here. Now, if you need cash without the controversy, the team at SaveWithConrad.com can help. But don't take my word for it.
Hi, my name is Richard Smith. I'm from Moss Point, Mississippi. One of my friends at work said I just been refinancing and my interest rate was 9%, and he said he got his for 2.3. So I said, well, maybe I should try. Got a hold of Diane. She kept in touch the whole entire time. We owned 2 houses and we rented one out, and my renter quit paying, so we gave it back to the mortgage company. And because we did that, we had to wait 3 years for an FHA loan to go back through. The one thing that Conrad said on his podcast was, we'll never tell you no. We might say, not now, this is what we need to do, and we'll make sure we get it done. Well, prime example, 3 years. And when they say no money out of pocket, there's no money out of pocket. They figure it out. But like, she was so quick that, don't worry about this, I got this first. That's what impressed me the most. My name is Richard Smith, and I saved $700 a month with SaveWithConrad.com.
And unlike the dirt sheets, these reviews don't lie. With over 1,000 5-star reviews, find out for yourself how much Conrad and his team can save you by checking out SaveWithConrad.com, and do it today.
NMLS number 32416, equal housing lender, SaveWithConrad.com.